specifically, what does it mean for us here now in Gracemont, in our church, in the way that we interact with each other? And then lastly, what does it mean for us here now in Gracemont, in our church, in the way that we interact with each other outside of the church, the community? How does that play out? So I've got very simply, we got 25 minutes and I've got 7 practical application truths, okay? These are 7 truths that you can pull out of this book and live by. And what we're going to do is I'm going to state the truth. If anybody has a comment, or if anybody has a question, or if there's a word that that you want further explained or anything, just say so. And then I'm going to give you the textual references in Titus to back this truth up. Number 1, the gospel produces godliness in the lives of believers. The gospel produces godliness in the lives of believers. There is no legitimate separation between belief and behavior. There is no legitimate separation between belief and behavior. Question: have you ever in your walk observed people that have a separation between their belief and their behavior? What does that look like, Marion?
Too hard to put into words. It's sad.
Here's what it looked like for me. I saw people at times who said they believed in something that I could not see in the way they lived. And maybe those people haven't said anything. Maybe they're just under the umbrella of a Christian. But at any rate, what they represent, what they stand for, what they proclaim does not match up with their actions. Now, what kind of effect can that have on you? For me, I'm still considered a new Christian. I've only been saved not very long. I've got a son older than I've been saved. So as a new Christian, when I see that, what effect can that have on you when someone's belief does not line up with their behavior? Yeah, so it has like this blanketing effect, right? Like that person or you may say, that person's like this, so all of them are like it, right? We use those biases all the time, don't we? Do I even want to be a part of that Christian thing? Yeah, sure. Matter of fact, I remember having a friend. It's a very sad time in my life. I was a youth minister, and I believe if I would have passed away, I would have went straight to hell. I believe God started the work of salvation in me at a young age, but I did not fully embrace God's love until some years back. But I was involved in the ministry, and I do believe that if I would have passed away, I would have spent eternity separated from God. I loved the message of Christianity, and I loved people, and I led many people to the Lord. But I myself did not experience the love of Christ. And I remember living 2 lives. I remember living the youth minister life. It was at Laverty Baptist Church, a precious church that I absolutely love. And at the same time, while that was happening, I was still dabbling in methamphetamines. And so what would happen is I would go teach on Wednesday night or Sunday morning or whatever. I would leave. I would go straight to my house. I'd make a phone call. The dope guy would show up, and then I'd have some friends come and hang out, friends that would not come and hang out unless the dope was there. And I remember telling myself, being so twisted, that I thought I will be a good influence on these guys. And I remember one guy looking at me, who knew I was a youth minister, and I just remember asking him to come to church, come to church, come to church. He said, "Bro, you're no different than me." There is no legitimate separation between belief and behavior. Where do we see that? We see that first in verse 1. Paul, a servant of God, an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the sake of the faith of God's elect and their knowledge of truth, which accords with godliness. Godliness is godly living. Paul, a servant, which is his actions, that's who he is, of Jesus Christ, an apostle of Jesus Christ, that's his belief. His behavior is godliness. So we see that first there. There's no separation. Also, we see it in 2 verse 1. But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Now, there's an implied statement here. Teach with what accords with sound doctrine, because sound doctrine produces biblical behavior. Right? There's no legitimate separation between behavior and belief. Later on, verses 11 through 14 of chapter 2, 11 and 14. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness, worldly passions, to live self-controlled, upright, godly lives in this present age. No separation between belief and behavior. And then it goes on to, it tells you why. Waiting for our blessed hope and appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. Not just who do good works, they're zealous for good works, meaning they do them with joy. They do them with a sense of urgency, and they look for an avenue to accomplish them. No separation between behavior and belief. Number 2. Absolutely. And here's to give you a perfect example. Some of the people in the room will know what I'm talking about. Some of you won't. And those that don't have to worry about it. But in the last 6 months, I've been in a position where, as a pastor, I've acted in ways that do not line up with what I say. I've lost my cool, been angry. I have not been self-controlled. Did not control myself sometimes. And those people that witness that could very well say, there's some reason, there's a separation between your belief and your behavior, because what you're saying is not what we're seeing. Does that make sense? So absolutely, practice what you preach. Absolutely. Number 2, thank you for asking the question. One's works will either prove or disprove one's claim to know God. One's works will either prove or disprove one's claim to know God. Where do we see that? Very simply and very soberly, we see that in chapter 1, verse 16. Someone read that for me.
They profess that they know God, but in works they deny Him, being abnormal and disobedient, and to every good work
Thank you. No, let's read another translation. Someone with a different translation, read it.
They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny Him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for anything good.
Perfect. They claim to know God. Mine, ESV says they profess to know God, but they deny him by their works. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for any good work. One's works will either prove or disprove one's claim to know God. If you remember the video, one thing that I love that the Bible Project pointed out was he pointed out the necessity of the church to be with the public. He explained the necessity of the church to be with the public. That's why I'm so glad we got followers of Jesus Christ in the public school system. That's why I'm so glad we got followers of Jesus Christ who own businesses, who interact with the community. You know, as we go about, as we get gas, as we go to school, as we do whatever, we're in the community. So as we go about saying, oh, it was a good church Sunday. Where do you go to church? I'll go to the Baptist church, which, by the way, it's funny. There's never First Baptist Church. It's the Baptist Church. You go to the Baptist Church? Yes, I do. We're the first ones. and they say, okay, well, that's cool. Well, what else did you learn? Well, it was just a good message about the Bible or whatever. But did you hear about Cody? Can you believe that after Sunday school, she came and told me what I should be doing? Can you believe that? Man, we should do something about that. And that's taking place in a public setting. And what happens is all of a sudden my works are disproving the faith that I claim. One's works will either prove or disprove one's claim to know God. Number 3, it is of eternal and vital importance. It is of eternal and vital importance to have godly men serving as pastors and deacons. It is of eternal and vital importance to have godly men serving as pastor and as deacons. It is just as important to have godly women and men serving in various leadership roles. Why? Because if your pastor or if your deacons are corrupt, the whole system's corrupt. Your church will reflect the leadership. And this is not about male or female or the Bible suppressing women or anything like that. What this is about the fact that God has called certain men to be pastors, elders, or deacons of congregations. And then God has called various men and women to serve in all kinds of capacities. He has anointed various men and women in all kinds of ways to serve in leadership. Whether that be in the different ministries of the church, children's ministry, youth ministry, senior adult ministry, whatever that is, whether that's to do with the operations and logistics of the church, visitation team or something like that, or Marian greeting at the door. God has called those people to be godly, and it's vital and it's of eternal effect. We see that in chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained in order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, his children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. For an overseer, a deacon or elder, as God's steward, a presbyter is also a synonym, as God's steward must be above reproach. What does that mean? Above reproach. It sucks, really. Right. Right. I'm not going to lie. Being above reproach sucks. Why? Because it's not like when I was a church member, when I was a layperson, I came in, I came out, and I'm not talking about when I got into discipleship and was involved. I'm saying when I was a frequenter of church. I came in, I came out, no one really knew, right? I didn't really interact with those people during the week. For all intents and purposes, they thought I was holy. So, but then there came a point in time when I began to let these people into my life, and they began to come into my life, and they would say to me, Blake, you can't smoke on your front porch. Why? You know I love to smoke cigars. Right. Yeah, that's in no, I'm playing. Sure. Doctors smoked while they gave surgeries. I mean, it used to be, they used to do all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's the truth, right? I mean, we celebrated smoking. So here's the deal. Fill in the blank. Take smoking out, fill in the blank. For me, it was smoking. Above reproach is to not have the ability for anyone to come at you and throw something at you, a charge, a rumor, whatever, and it stick. So it's not that they're not going to come at you. It just means when they come at you, what they throw at you doesn't stick. Make sense? All right. And then we see it also in chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good and so train the young women. If you remember, this older-younger relationship is not on one side or the other. The older has to initiate. The younger has to be teachable and approachable, right? And so train the young women to love their husbands and children and to be self-controlled, pure, working at home. This does not mean not making money outside the home. This just means working the ministry of their home. Jamie and I have talked about this. Jamie's a professional, and she also has a household. And as a woman, she works, and she also cares for her household. She works her household, and this is the same kind of thing that it's saying here. Self-control, pure, working at home, kind, submissive to their own husbands, so that the word of God may not be reviled, so it won't stick. All right, number 4. I know we got 10 minutes left. Do you need me to repeat number 3? Okay. Number 4. True Christian living. By the way, I just have these written down on a piece of paper, and afterwards, you guys are welcome to come grab this paper. I normally type it out, but this happened a lot different than I planned it. Number 4, true Christian living will draw others to the gospel. True Christian living will draw others to the gospel. And here's the second part of that. Genuine Christian living breeds effective evangelism. Genuine Christian living breeds effective evangelism. I use the word breed. At first, it didn't set right in my mind. I'm thinking that don't really set right, breed. But what that exposes is a process. It breeds it. It's a process. It's the process of living godly year after year in the community. But if we do that, it will draw people in. But the opposite's true. If we don't, if we live false Christian lives, if we live ill-genuine or ungenuine lives, it'll push people away from the gospel. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So what we're talking about in number 2 are good works. And what we're talking about in number 4 is more of an authentic, genuine life that includes good works, which is what you said. So it's the ability to say, I'm broken to others. It's the ability to say, I don't have this figured out. I'm not some super Christian, that I go through life like you go through life. People have miscarriages in the church just like people have miscarriages outside the church. People have divorces in the church just like people have divorces outside the church, right? So sometimes what the church does is we like to put up a wall and we like to act like it's not as rough as it is. When the truth is it's just as rough in here to do life godly as it is out there to do life godly sometimes. And so the genuineness is when your faith, regardless of your title, role, or influence, is seen in your life. Because that will. Now, take a body of people that are doing that. Not just one, but take a group of people that are doing that in a town of Gracemont. It'll draw people to the church. Yeah, man, I've never thought about that, Jay, but you're right. Vulnerability. Having a level of vulnerability. Absolutely. That's scary, isn't it? Especially if you've been hurt. There's a guy in this town, you know probably who he is. I'm not going to say his name. Who will not step foot in a church. Never mind. Who will not step foot in a church because of what was done to him as a child by a pastor. Not sexually or anything like that, but just something that was mishandled as a child. It had completely ruined him. He saw genuine faith. He saw no vulnerability whatsoever. He saw no transparency whatsoever. And he saw the abuse of power and authority within the church. And it ruined him. To this day, he gets fighting mad when you talk about church. Number 5. By the way, if you're writing down references for number 4, it's chapter 2, verse 5, verse 8, verse 10. Chapter 2, verse 5, verse 8, verse 10. All right, number 5, the 5th truth. Good works have an important place in the life of a believer. Good works have an important place in the life of a believer. Where do we see that at? We start in chapter 2, 1 through 10. He talks about teaching sound doctrine. He talks about the relationships between men, women, and slaves. Then in verse 14, he says, who gave himself for us to redeem us for all lawlessness, to purify himself for a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. We are God's. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9 says we are saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. And then the rest of that, verse 10, talks about how we were created before for good works that were prepared for us before the foundation of time. Like, so we're not saved by works, but we live by our works. And so it's important that we understand the presence of good works has to be of value to you if you're a believer. Paul said that it's a value to Christians in Crete. The references are chapter 2, 1 through 10, verse 14, then chapter 3, verse 1 and 2, verse 8, verse 14. And I'm going to get verse 14, just so you know. I'm going to get verse 14, and we're going to have a bigger TV, 72-inch TV. It's going to go right here, and then this TV is going to go on the back of the wall. And I want to get a banner that has chapter 3, verse 14, and I want to hang it on one side, maybe get another scripture and hang it on the other. But verse 14, to me, is a theme verse for our church. It says, let our people learn to devote themselves to good works. What are you devoted to, man? Priority, absolutely. Absolutely. And we all know about priorities, right? My father was Air Force. Bill, you're in military. When you're in military, Uncle Sam, priority. Right? They don't care about your private life. They don't care that your son's got a baseball game. No, the priority is the task that the general's given you or whatever your commander's given you. It's the same thing here. Our priority has to be being a light. Number 6. It is important. This is the hardest one probably. I'm probably going to go about 7 minutes over. So if anybody does need to leave, I completely understand. It is important to deal clearly and firmly. It is important to deal clearly and firmly with doctrinal error and moral impurity in the church. It is important to deal clearly and firmly with doctrinal error and moral impurity within the church. Now let me ask you a question. From your church experience, those of y'all that have been at this church your whole life, you don't have to answer that. For those of y'all that have been to other churches, through your experience, what is the common response when you have bad doctrine, bad teaching that's been identified? Well, this church was split over the issue of Calvinism one time. Y'all know about that. That's bad doctrine. It's bad teaching. God doesn't preordain some for heaven and some for hell. It's anyone who would call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's bad teaching. Well, I wasn't here when that came, but how was that handled? Was it dealt with clearly and firmly, or was it vague? Was it opaque? Clearly and firmly? Okay. Why? But why? Why must it be dealt with clearly and firmly? That's right. That's right. That's right. Moral impurity is the hardest. Bad doctrine, it's a little easier. Why? Because someone teaches bad doctrine, we just hold up good doctrine. Right? Moral impurity is hard. And what's the response of a lot of churches when there's moral impurity in place? Overlook it, right? Pick up the rug, sweep it under the rug. Justify it, especially by the one who's morally impure. Justifies their behavior. Right? All of it is just so we can get past it and keep moving, and there's no clear definitive dealing with it at all. Whether either party's right or wrong, there's no clear definitive thing.
We're afraid to teach church. Like, if we had someone, there would be something like, I don't know, maybe not the illegal scale, but something, telling you, like, you know, what's going on. We looked away, it's not really looking at it and saying, like, there's whispers that go around, everybody doesn't know that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But we're afraid to expose it, because we're afraid people are going to be like, oh, that happened in their church. Don't go down there.
Right.
Yeah,
Or
we made the stand, we decided to say, hey, this is either going to be corrected or whatever. You make a stand like in Gracemont, then people say, wait a minute,
Right.
okay with that.
Right.
And I think see it
And how we deal with it's important, isn't it? Yeah. See, the deacons and I meet. The deacons and I in leadership meet. The deacons and I and the leadership team meet. And those meetings aren't before the public church. Why? Because some of the issues we deal with would be poison to the general eye and ear. So the leadership deals with it. What happened in Acts? Widows were getting unfed. Who brought up the issue? The church did. They brought it up. It arose. Leadership dealt with it what? Clearly, firmly. All right, the reference for that is chapter 1, verses 10 through 16. I'm not reading this for the sake of time. Chapter 1, verses 10 through 16. We only got one more. Hang in there. Chapter 3, verses 9 through 11. My back's killing me, and I'm hungry, for the record. Chapter 3, verses 9 through 11. Jamie, this is going to sound weird, especially on the Facebook live stream, but that oil was amazing. It's been good. Yeah, it really has. You become my new oil dealer. Yeah. It's her own concoction. I don't know. It's her own deal. Yeah. It's good, though. It's really good when you get it in your eye. All right, number 7. And this is the last one, and this is the most important. That's why it's number 7. 7's a number of perfection. That's why I strive for 7 points. It's also the reason why we ended with Christ the solid rock on the praise and worship song. Number 7 is the gospel of Jesus Christ is the basis and the foundation for all Christian living and ethics. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the basis, meaning why, and the foundation, meaning how, for all Christian living and Christian ethics. So when someone says don't lie, we don't lie because of what Christ on the cross did. When someone says don't steal, we don't steal because of what Christ did on the cross. Everything comes back to that. Today, this is my last confession. Let me give you these references real quick. Chapter 2, verses 11 through 14, right? Paul gives Titus all these instructions, and then he says, because of what Christ did, the gospel. And then also chapter 3, verses 3 through 7. Same thing. Verses 3 through 7. It's that beautiful poem that they said in the show. Here's what this means practically in your life. And then we're done. I have a dog named Fender who's a basset hound. I hate him and I love him. My wife illegally obtained another dog. No, it was a legal adoption. It was just illegal in my eyes, but I'm playing. But the kids wanted the puppy. We got the puppy. Puppy's pretty. Puppy's small. Not no more. He's big. And he's crazy. And he digs. And he jumps the fence. And he can scale the fence. He can find the weak spots in the fence and push the fence over and wiggle through. Or if you correct all those measures, he then digs the red dirt out from under the fence to where he can eradicate himself from the backyard. And this has been an ongoing battle that I've lost there's good reason why no one can see us living on the hill sometimes. But I'll be like, his name's Buddy, and I'll start yelling, Buddy, I correct him. Now, he's an obedient dog, isn't he, Cody? He's obedient. He won't run from you. You say stop, he stops. You say sit, I've trained him to sit, he stays, all that stuff. He just won't listen about getting out of the yard. And so, like today, I've been having a hard time processing emotions. You remember I told you earlier, I want mercy and I don't give mercy. And so there's been like this river of anger flowing through me here recently, if you guys can relate to that. Like anger for no reason. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you're just angry. Some of it's past experiences. Some of it are experiences you haven't even had yet. It's just there. And every once in a while, you dip off the shores of God's peace and put your toe in the river of anger, right? That's what we do sometimes. And what happened today is the dog dug a hole through the corner of the yard, the southeast corner of the yard, and I already had him on a chain for punishment, because that's what we do. He jumps the fence, he loses his freedom, he gets on a chain for 24 hours. Then we let him off, he's good for 48 hours, and he jumps the fence, and we put him on a chain. So he's on the chain. So while he's on the chain, he digs out from underneath the fence, and he gets himself caught. And I catch him. And what